What if being born into luxury sets the stage for an unexpected revolution? Sophie Harrington, the millionaire's daughter, grapples with her privilege as she ignites a fight against police racism. But nothing could prepare her for the betrayals that lie ahead. Can a privileged daughter truly become a champion of the oppressed? Sophie Harrington glanced around her opulent bedroom. The marble floors and silk drapes were nothing more than a backdrop to her turmoil. Beautifully adorned, her world felt increasingly superficial in the wake of Mark's assault to reality she could no longer ignore. Every detail of her life, every privilege she enjoyed, came crashing down upon her like an ominous wave, forcing her to confront a truth she had long sheltered herself from. The memory of that day plagued her. Mark, her friend, shattered both her, physically and emotionally, a casualty of brutality that should never have happened. She replayed it in her mind, the police sirens echoing like the sound of her own privilege, tightening around her throat, suffocating her empathy. Suddenly, the lavish parties and designer clothes felt like shackles, rather than marks of success. "What have I done?" she muttered to herself, her reflection staring back as if questioning her very existence. This incident had reignited a fire inside her, a stark contrast to the complacency of her life until now. With each breath, she felt the weight of her father's words from years past, discussions filled with talk of maintaining their family's power, influence, and most importantly, the distance from the struggles of the people beneath them. Now, those words felt like a heavy anchor, pulling her deeper into a sea of doubt. As she paced her room, Sophie grappled with a cascade of conflicting feelings. Was she ready to step into the role of an activist? Could her wealth be a bridge to meaningful change? Or would it only serve as another barrier to understanding the very suffering she wished to alleviate? How could she even begin to make a difference without tripping over her privilege? The television buzzed in the background, stale news reports flooding the airwaves with grief and despair. Each segment failed to encapsulate Mar's reality, igniting a sense of urgency within her. She reached for her phone, the screen illuminating her resolve as she began searching for local activist groups. Her fingers hesitated over the screen, her heart pounding in anticipation. This was her chance to leap into the unknown that felt both exhilarating and terrifying. After what felt like hours, she connected with a few organizations, and despite her eagerness, she flinched at what awaited her. The reception was ice cold. Skepticism radiated from every interaction. She could almost sense their judgment, aware that her status painted her as a backslider in their eyes. Who does she think she is? She could almost hear them whisper, a dagger driven deep into the heart of her resolve. "Maybe they're right," she whispered, her throat tightening. The dismissal stung but ignited a stubborn defiance within her. "I will show them," she resolved fiercely, recalling Mark's haunted gaze. Despite the battles ahead, she was determined to prove her sincerity. Just as she mentally prepared for her first public meeting, her phone dinged with an anonymous message. Heart racing, she opened it, the text reading, "You should know about your father's connections to the police. It goes deeper than you think." Her breath caught. What did this mean? Panic mingled with anxiety, clutching at her gut, the revelation looming like a dark cloud. Could the family empire she had long been part of hinder her fight for justice? More disconcertingly, would this painful truth derail her from the cause she had only recently embraced? As questions swirled through her mind, Sophie knew one thing for certain. She was on the precipice of a journey that would not only redefine her identity, but also challenge everything she believed about her world. Sophie stood at the front of the room, her palms slick with sweat as she faced the sea of unfamiliar faces. The air buzzed with tension, sharp whispers punctuating the silence like daggers. She searched for a hint of support among the crowd, a nod, a smile, but the only expressions she saw were etched with skepticism and mistrust. At that moment, the weight of her privileged upbringing felt like an anchor, pulling her down as she prepared to share her journey. "Thank you all for gathering here today," she began, her voice shaky yet resolute. "I'm Sophie, and I'm here because I want to align myself with your fight against police brutality and systemic injustice. As she spoke, she felt the weight of their eyes upon her, feeling exposed and vulnerable. "I don't mean to intrude. I've never faced the prejudice you live with, but I want to listen and learn," she added, her heart racing. She glanced at Sam, a childhood friend who had always believed in her. His supportive presence was a lifeline, yet his face was a mask of concern, and that worried her. "You think just because you come from a wealthy family, you can waltz in here and speak for us?" a voice shouted from the back, slicing through her nerves. It was a woman with fierce determination written all over her face. The room shifted, a low murmur rippling through the activists, and Sophie's heart sank. "Wait!" she started, but the voices grew louder, feelings of pain and anger intertwining in the air. "No, you have no idea what oppression looks like," the woman continued, her words a charge against Sophie. "You're here because it's trendy, not because you understand what we've been through. You'll never know our struggle." Every word felt like a blow. Sophie's breath hitched, her resolve suddenly threatened by their accusations. She could feel her cheeks flush as the spotlight of scrutiny intensified, drowning her in a mix of shame and anger. "Sophie," stammered, a tightness. Sophie stammered, a tightness stand. Sophie stammered, a tightness in her throat constraining her voice. "I can't change what I've had, but I can be here. Being here isn't enough." The harsh truth hung in the air, louder than any applause for her previous statements. With each round of confrontations, frustration bubbled within her. Yet the sting of the critics morphed into fuel. She was realizing, though painfully, that mere participation would not validate her intentions. Sam stood up, raising his hand. "Everyone, please," he began, his voice steady but tinged with concern. "Sophie's here to learn. We should give her a chance." The room hesitated, unsure whether to accept his plea. The doubt in everyone's eyes told Sophie everything she feared. Her privilege had come with a cost. The implications of her background loomed large, shackled to her desire to fight, making her feel both like an outsider and an imposter. As the debate spiraled, her mind swirled with the reality that she had much to learn. Would these seasoned activists ever accept someone raised on the other side of the tracks? Did she even belong here among them? In the midst of it all, Ray caught her attention, leaning against the wall, his demeanor confident and charismatic. Something about him intrigued her, yet she was also wary. Did he really see her potential, or was he merely another clever voice, cloaked in manipulation? The dichotomy spun in her mind like a whirlwind. His guidance seemed enticing, yet disquieting her. Heart told her to proceed with caution. "Stay strong," Ray whispered as he approached her after the heated meeting. "I'll come around. Just show them your commitment." Just as she considered his advice, her thoughts shifted back to Sam, who approached her with a troubled expression. "Sophie, can we talk?" "Sure. It's just..." She hesitated. "It's hard right now. I feel like I'm drowning in their expectations." "I get that," he replied, a pained expression cutting across his features. "But I need you to understand something. My ties to Mark's community run deep. Supporting you means risking everything I've built with them. Can you handle that?" A chill ran down her spine as realization struck the conflict was more personal than she anticipated. Her heart raced, unraveling emotions, tangled between friendship and activism, questioning whether their bond would survive the weight of her ambitions and his loyalty. The path before them suddenly felt treacherous, fraught with peril, as uncertainty loomed over her resolve. Would she push forward and prove her worth, or would the chasm between their worlds tear them apart? The rally's planning had become a whirlwind, drawing Sophie deeper into the activist community. With each passing day, her determination surged, matching the urgency of the cause. Yet, as she collaborated closely with Ray, a seasoned activist whose reputation bordered on legendary, an unsettling feeling nestled in the pit of her stomach. His strategies often strayed into morally ambiguous territory, and though his commitment to the movement was undeniable, she couldn't shake the nagging thought. Was the end justifying the means? During meetings, heated discussions erupted as tensions escalated. Issues of trust hung in the air thick like the humid summer night. Sophie watched as disagreements sparked among the members, dust motes swirling in the sunlight, slipping through the windows, revealing cracks in their unity. The unease reflected her own internal struggle. Did she truly belong among these passionate voices, each lined with experience and hardship? Self-doubt bubbled beneath the surface, threatening to erupt as she listened. "Listen, you think privilege gives you a voice?" A voice snapped across the table, a seasoned activist with piercing eyes and a loud, accusing tone. The words pierced through Sophie like a dagger, quickening her pulse. The room fell silent, and she felt the weight of every gaze fixated upon her. She began, but the words caught in her throat. Was it privilege that brought her here? Was she merely a bystander trying to reposition herself in a narrative where she had no rightful place? The accusation spun her thoughts like a whirlwind, amplifying her resolve. She had promised herself that she'd prove her commitment. The stakes felt higher than ever. "That's not fair," someone interjected, aiming to ease the growing animosity. But Sophie felt the walls closing in, the tension palpable as she fought against the swirling doubts. Gathering her courage, she leaned forward. "I'm here because I believe in this cause. I'm learning," but her voice faltered under the weight of their scrutiny. Hope mingled with desperation, and Sophie sensed the panicked urgency rising as she glanced at the media reports flashing across her phone. The police had been cracking down harder than before, deploying aggression against protest movements. Each headline twisted a knot in her stomach. Resistance was being met with violence, and she knew they had to act. With sudden clarity, she decided to reach out to her parents, her pulse racing with the implications of leveraging their connections. It felt like stepping into a world stamped with cold efficiency and unyielding power, a place she hadn't anticipated being drawn to. Would she lose herself in that realm? The day of the rally arrived, excitement buzzing through the air. However, as the crowd gathered, trembling with anticipation, everything shifted in an instant. Chaos erupted, shouts and cries thundered, mingling with the sound of sirens. Sophie's heart dropped as she watched in disbelief. The police charged in, batons raised, and panic ensued. "Sam!" The scream tore from her lips as she recognized a familiar form caught in the turmoil. The world spun around her. The reality of the brutality they were fighting against crashing down like a tidal wave. With fear gripping her heart, she fought against the current of bodies pushing past her, battling against the overwhelming sense of helplessness. This was her reckoning. Would she turn away or stand firm in the storm? Determination hardened within her. She had to confront not only the violence, but also the implications of her previous actions. As the dust started to settle, Sophie's resolve deepened, mirroring the chaos swirling within. The moment of truth loomed ahead, and she knew she had to chart a new course. The stakes were now higher than she had ever imagined. Sophie sat alone on the edge of her bed, the flickering candle casting shaky shadows that danced across the walls. The chaos of the rally felt like a distant storm, yet the weight of it pressed down on her. Was her voice really making a difference? Or was she just a naive daughter playing at activism? Self-doubt gnawed at her insides, its fingers icy and relentless. The hospital room felt sterile and cold as Sophie held Sam's hand, their connection steady and grounding. Sam's bruises told a story of brutality she couldn't ignore, the reality of their fight all too palpable now. She looked into his eyes, those tired yet fierce eyes, and understood a new truth. "Sam," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, as if speaking above a shout would shatter the moment. "I thought calling for justice would be enough." Her heart ached with the enormity of what she hadn't grasped until now. "It's not just a voice, Sophie," he replied slowly, his grip tightening ever so slightly. "You have to do more. You've got the means, the connections, leverage it. Your family can help change things. You can demand more than just tweets and speeches. The urgency in Sam's voice ignited a fire within her, yet a shadow crept into her mind, darkening her newfound resolve. She had always known about her father's resolve. She had always known corporate empire, but now the connections to police contracts lay like a heavy shroud over her conscience. Her family's wealth seemed less like a safety net and more like a noose tightening around her ideals. Days turned into restless nights as thoughts swirled. Alone in the quiet of her home, she replayed Sam's words over and over, and the enormity of what lay ahead paralyzed her. It wasn't just a call for justice, it was a confrontation with her own family. The moment she found the courage to confront her father felt like an ocean shift. In the imposing office, adorned with accolades and wealth, she faced him, her heart pounding against her ribs. "Dad, we need to talk about your company's ties with the police." His reaction was immediate. A wave of irritation washed over his features. "What do you mean? Those contracts are just business. They're necessary for maintaining order." "Necessary?" she echoed, her voice rising. "This business contributes to the very violence we're fighting against. Don't you see that?" His dismissive chuckle echoed in the vast space, cold and infuriating. "Sophie, you're not seeing the bigger picture. You can't simply ignore reality." "But I am living in reality, Dad. I can't remain quiet while our wealth comes from the oppression of others." The anger bubbling within her spilled over. Her hands shook at her side, a physical manifestation of her internal turmoil. "Enough!" Yet she pressed on, unyielding. "No, it's not enough. You've taught me to stand up for what is right. How can you ignore the truth when it's so glaringly obvious?" His expression shifted, the facade of stoic confidence cracking as anguish flickered in his eyes. "You don't understand, Sophie. This is our legacy, our family." With that word legacy struck a chord that reverberated painfully within her. The tension thickened, creating a chasm between them. "I won't inherit a legacy of complicity. You need to own up to what you're part of." The ensuing silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of her harsh breaths, every inhalation fueled by fury and betrayal. She felt the fracture deepen, a chasm she wasn't sure they could cross. "I will not remain silent anymore," she declared, the finality of her words ringing in the air, echoing the shuddering foundation of their relationship. But as Sophie left the room, a chilling thought snagged in her mind. Digging deeper into her father's dealings might reveal more than just corruption. It might shatter everything she thought she knew about their family. In the dark corners of her thoughts, a realization dawned. If what she feared was true, then the ramifications of her next steps would not only affect her, but could very well upend the world she had known. In those impending shadows, an unsettling truth lingered, waiting to be unearthed, a dark revelation that threatened to dismantle her world entirely, one that could embroil her in a much more dangerous fight. As Sophie stood on the balcony of her opulent family estate, the city sprawled beneath a web of complexity and struggle, a stark contrast to the polished life she had known. The shadows of the past clung to her, haunted by betrayal and shattered trust. Anger surged through her, propelling her forward into the uncharted territory of activism. She felt alive for the first time, channeling her pain into purpose. The community's rallying support filled the void her father's disdain had carved in her heart. They viewed her not just as the millionaire's daughter, but as a beacon of defiance, a passionate voice challenging her family's legacy transformation she had never imagined herself capable of. But behind this newfound identity loomed the specter of the doubt, whispering insidious questions. Ray's intentions felt increasingly murky, and murmurs of caution from her friends in the activist circle echoed in her mind. "Are you sure about him, Sophie?" one had asked during a hastily arranged meeting. "He has a way of taking charge. But is he really on our side?" Sophie bit her lip, pushing back the unease swirling within. She had relied on Ray's expertise, but something nagged at her, a wariness creeping in. The tightrope of trust was fraying, and she couldn't afford to stumble. Determined, she forged ahead, orchestrating a new campaign aimed at empowering the community and amplifying their voices against police brutality. With every stride she took, encouragement enveloped her like a warm blanket, bolstering her confidence and illuminating the dim shadows of despair that lingered around her. Solidarity, everything began to unravel. The truth struck like a bolt of lightning. Ray was playing both sides. The revelation shattered her, leaving her reeling. Anger surged within her as she confronted him in the dim light of a community center, the weight of betrayal heavy between them. "Why, Ray?" she demanded, her voice quaking with a mix of fury and disbelief. "How could you manipulate people who trust you?" Ray's posture shifted, defensive yet somber. "Sophie, it's not what you think. Hill wanted to protect the movement. I thought we could use the unrest to our advantage. By turning people against us?" she scoffed, crossing her arms tightly, guarding her heart. She searched his eyes for sincerity, struggling to reconcile the warmth he had once offered with this chilling truth. "You're jeopardizing everything we stand for." His expression softened, his flicker of vulnerability surfacing. "I didn't mean for it to come to this. I battled with my own demons. My ambition has blinded me." Sophie felt a sharp pang of empathy amidst her Andrea connection that blurred the lines of loyalty. Could she expose him for his treachery while recognizing his struggle? The question spiraled in her mind, an internal conflict brewing like a storm. "I don't know if I can trust you anymore, Ray. This isn't just about me. It's about the community." Her heart raced as she considered the implications of his deception. Was their shared goal worth the risk of his betrayal? Just then, a new urgency clawed at her insides. She received word of an impending police tactic aimed at dismantling their movement, details swirling ominously in the air. It was a brutal reminder that time was running out, not just for their protest, but for her choice between aligning with Ray or severing ties to protect her community. As she stood there, the weight of the decision pressed on her. What path would she choose? The stakes felt impossibly high. Could she outsmart her father while navigating the twisted loyalties surrounding her? Each option seemed fraught with peril, and as she looked into Ray's conflicted gaze, uncertainty gripped her heart like a vice. Sophie paced the dimly lit room, her thoughts swirling like a tempest. They were on the brink of something monumental, yet the weight of her father's influence cast a long shadow, threatening to snuff out their movement before it truly began. She could feel the tension crackling in the air, a mixture of fear and defiance humming around her. The stakes had never been higher. "Sam," she called, her voice barely masking the quiver of anxiety beneath it. He looked up from his scattered notes, the bruises on his arms still a painful reminder of their last protest. "We need to gather everyone. Now. Are you sure?" Sam's brows furrowed with concern, his loyalty to her unwavering, but his worry was palpable. "This could backfire. Your dad will find a way to spin it against us." Sophie nodded, her heart pounding as thoughts of her father filled her mind. With thoughts of her each passing moment, the whispers of her allies echoed louder, doubts seeping into her resolute facade. Was she really strong enough to lead them through this turmoil? "I know, but if we don't counter this crackdown, we'll lose everything we've fought for." As Sam gathered their closest allies, Sophie fought to quell the growing doubts. Voices trailed in and out of her mind, a cacophony of fear and uncertainty surrounding her. They convened in a huddle, a mixture of determination and trepidation evident on their faces. "We've discussed the risks," Sophie started, her voice steady, but her insides churning. But we can't let fear dictate our future. We'll devise strategies to ensure our voices won't be silenced." Amidst the murmurs of agreement, Sam chimed in. "What if we use social media to galvanize support before the protest? Show the world what's really happening out there." "Exactly." Sophie's heart soared at the idea, yet a shadow flickered in her mind. Her father's influence loomed large. He was already spinning tales to isolate her from those who looked to her for leadership. And if we can expose his lies just then? The door creaked open. The sudden intrusion made the room freeze. Why do I have a feeling this little meeting is about me? A smooth voice cut through the tension. It was her father, standing in the doorway with an air of authority. "Dad," Sophie said, barely able to keep her voice steady. "This isn't what you think, isn't it? I see my daughter gathering people to conspire against their own families." His expression was a mask of disbelief. "You don't understand the dangers of what you're doing, Sophie?" Anger surged within her. "You mean the dangers to your reputation? The risks of being exposed for what you really are?" "Watch your words," he warned, icy calmness invading the space between them. "I won't stand by while you try to dismantle everything I believe in," she shot back, her hands trembling but fists clenched. This was the moment she had been waiting for, the confrontation that could change everything. "Believe in? You're playing with fire. And if you burn, this community will go down with you." His words stung, the betrayal cutting deeper than any injury she'd received in protest. "I'd rather fight for what's right than sit in comfort, cloistered by privilege," she declared, heart pounding. Then, with fierce resolve, she pulled a file from her bag, a compilation of evidence detailing his manipulations and alliances with the police. Her father's expression morphed into shock, fury simmering just below the surface. "You wouldn't dare expose us." "Me! I already have," she barked back, her voice strong, unwavering. As she stormed to the media gathering outside, Sophie's heart raced. With each word she spoke, the crowd's murmurs grew louder, rallying around her revelation of corruption. This was the moment they needed, their defiance, sparking outrage against police misconduct, uniting the community like never before. But just as victory seemed within reach, an unsettling feeling twisted in her gut. As choices were made and alliances formed under a banner of hope, Sophie felt a chilling reminder surfacing. The police would retaliate. With the rage of the community at their backs, would they find the strength to face what loomed ahead? As the swell of support surged, a haunting question filled her mind. Who among them would truly stand by her side when the storm hit? Her father had made his intentions clear, but at what cost would she continue this fight? Moments later, a police siren echoed in the distance, reverberating what they had set in motion, leaving Sophie to query whether she could bear the weight of leadership while embracing the inevitable cruelty coming for them all. Sophie stood rigidly, her heart pounding as the weight of uncertainty bore down on her. The police had cracked down with such force that her friends had been dragged away, their cries fading into the echoes of sirens. Each arrest felt like a personal blow, a violent reminder of what they were fighting against. Could they prevail? Or was this the beginning of the end? The thought gnawed at her, casting shadows over her resolve. In the aftermath, fear had snaked its way through the community, and whispers of doubt wormed into her allies' minds. They banded together, but the unity felt fragile, splintered by the unrelenting pressure from those who opposed them. "Can she really lead us through this?" Someone had murmured, and those words haunted her like a specter. Her mind drifted back to Ray, his ambiguous motives flickering like a candle about to extinguish. Was he with them, or merely waiting for an opportune moment to step away? Sophie squeezed her eyes shut, retreating into the sanctuary of her thoughts. This fight wasn't just about politics or protests. It was personal. Her friends were the ones directly affected by the systemic injustices they faced every day. She felt a surge of determination ripple through her. They deserved someone unwaveringly committed to the cause, a voice amplifying their struggles, spotlighting the darkness unfolding around them. Plunging into social media, she ignited a firestorm of live coverage. With each stream, she showcased the brutality against the protesters, capturing every moment of repression. The outrage sparked anew, reviving hope amid despair. But even as there, But movement grew. A nagging doubt lurked at the edges of her mind. Standing at the crossroads of privilege and purpose, she couldn't help but question the authenticity of her campaign. Did she truly belong in this fight, or was she merely playing a role borrowed from the pages of someone else's story? Just then, her phone buzzed a message from Sam. His initial discontent was spilling over, his frustration evident. Sophie's heart sank as she read the words that laid bare his intentions. He was documenting everything. An exposé. The revelation felt like a dagger twisting in her gut. The fragile alliance they had painstakingly built now dangled perilously, swaying between trust and betrayal. She needed to confront him, to understand what lay beneath the surface of his actions. "Why can't you just talk to me?" she questioned, her voice trembling slightly as she found him alone, his expression mixed with defiance and fear. "Is this about the movement, or you trying to gain your own spotlight? Don't you see?" Sam's voice slammed into her like a wave. "If I can show the world what's happening, maybe we'll get the support we need. I'm terrified of losing what we're fighting for. This isn't personal, it's about the truth." His words echoed in her ears, stirring a whirlwind of emotions. Did he want to protect the movement? Or was there a more self-serving agenda lurking behind that earnest gaze? They stood on an emotional battleground, loyalty splintering like glass. As she searched his eyes, she felt the ground shift beneath her, the stakes escalating with each heartbeat. Sophie knew their fates were intertwined in this battle, but how could they navigate such treacherous waters? Betrayal loomed like a dark cloud overhead, and the thought of losing him made her stomach churn. With silence stretching between them, she pondered the ultimatum that hovered over her, igniting her spirit once more. A choice loomed, one that would define everything. As if on cue, a notification pinged in a message from law enforcement. The urgency cut through her hesitation, an ultimatum that demanded her immediate attention. In that moment, all she could think was, what would she choose? Activism or silence? The brewing storm's intensity wrapped around her like a shroud, leaving only one thing clear. The fight was far from over. The clock ticked mercilessly as Sophie felt the weight of the ultimatum. Every beat echoed her urgency, prodding her to rally her allies and devise a plan. The once familiar atmosphere seemed now to thrum with shadows of betrayal. Was she merely marching towards an inevitable downfall? Trust, that fragile web holding her movement together, began to strain painfully as her mind swirled with doubts. As she paced the small room, her thoughts returned to Sam. Their bond, forged in the fires of activism, now flickered with uncertainty. She knew they had to confront the shifting tides of their relationship. But what if he wasn't the ally she believed him to be? The thought nagged at her, drawing deep lines of concern across her brow. "Sam," she called, her voice breaking the tension like glass shattering. He entered, his expression inscrutable, and the air grew thick with unspoken fears. "Sophie, we need to be careful," Sam said, his tone laced with tension. "There's too much at stake." "Is that what you truly believe?" she shot back. "Or is it what you want to believe to justify keeping your distance? We're fighting for truth, not just damage control." He hesitated, eyes searching hers, but she saw the flicker of something deeper: fear. His breath trembled as he responded, I'm afraid, Sophie. Afraid that exposing the movement will do more harm than good. People will get hurt." Pain pinched at her heart. "So, that's your plan? To hold us back under the guise of protection? Who are you really trying to protect?" "No," Sam stumbled, emotion punctuating every word. "I want to show them our struggles, not expose us to the vultures out there. We need to generate support, raise awareness of our plight." Tears gathered in her eyes, frustration melting into vulnerability. "And what if it's too late for that? You think hiding the truth will save us? My father has built his empire on this oppression, and people deserve to see that." Sam stepped closer, determination lacing his voice. "Sophie, together, we can make a difference without tearing everything apart. I care about you and this movement. We need each other." Their gazes locked, the tension a living entity between them, heartbreak, hope, and ambition, fighting for supremacy. In that charged silence, Sophie wrestled with complex emotions bubbling just below the surface. Could her commitment to truth shatter the most important bond she had? Taking a deep breath, she finally spoke. Her resolve strengthened. "I know we're pulling in different directions, but this fight requires us to confront our own truth, Sam. We can be friends and warriors in this revolution. We must expose my father's dealings together before they could find common ground." The silence was shattered by the sudden jingle of notifications from their phones. Sophie grabbed her device, her heart racing. The evening news was flickering with an unexpected announcement. "What is it?" Sam asked, concern etched across his face. Sophie barely registered the words as they unfurled in front of her. "No, no way." Her voice dropped to a whisper, disbelief choking her. There, her father stood on live television, publicly denouncing her actions and rallying the community against her. "This is a disaster," Sam gasped, stepping back, and Sophie felt the ground beneath her shift unsteadily. The betrayal was blinding, rupturing any semblance of trust from her still loyal allies. "How can you do this?" she breathed, her mind racing. "Everything we've built, it could all fall apart now." As the urgency of the situation sank in, a chilling thought swept through her. If her own father turned against her at such a critical moment, what would that mean for the rally? What sacrifices would she have to make for the cause? The stakes had never been higher, the threat more immediate. The room was suddenly charged with a terrifying energy, and her heart raced with the urgency of unanswered questions. What if this was only the beginning? What other revelations lay in the shadows, waiting for the perfect moment to surface? As Sophie stood at the edge of her father's grand estate, the chilling realization washed over. Her privilege had been both her protector and her prison. Shadows of uncertainty loomed, entwining with the legacy she had once cherished. She could almost cherished. Hear the taunting echo of her father's voice, reminding her of the advantages wealth had bestowed upon her. In a world where privilege can be both a shield and a sword, how far would you go to fight for justice? She wondered, mulling over the words she had proclaimed during her speech earlier that evening. Doubt crept in, twisting around her heart. Would she sacrifice the warmth of her childhood home, her father's approval, to pursue a cause that felt more right than familial loyalty? The moment stretched as she faced the unsettling truth. Her father's betrayal cut deeper than any protester's fist. It wasn't just his stance on the issues, it was his disdain for her mission. Each point of contention pierced her resolve. It was as if the world was asking her to choose between a love she held dear and the passion ignited by the cries for justice. As she turned away from the estate, Sophie felt a mixture of fear and determination churning within her. This was the defining moment where courage met doubt and anger. It was a turning point that every activist grapples with a gut-wrenching choice between familial love and moral obligation. How do we define ourselves when confronted by those we love? The question echoed ominously in her mind, fueling the fire behind her resolve. "What you're doing is dangerous, Sophie. You're playing with fire," her mother had said earlier, concern etched across her features. "And for what? To throw away everything we've built?" Sophie clenched her fists, remembering the faces of those silenced by oppression. "It's not about throwing it away, Mom," she had replied, her voice shaky but firm. "It's about fighting for those who never had a chance to build anything at all." It was these voices marginalized and forgotten that educated her on strength in adversity. Remembering their struggles, she drew a deep breath, feeling the weight of their untold stories in her chest. In times of turmoil, it's not just about who we stand with. It's about fighting for those who have been silenced. She understood now that she had a responsibility that far exceeded her own personal comfort. The most marginalized voices often carry the greatest wisdom, and it was time to help amplify them. This was her revolution, and the battle wasn't confined within her father's estate. It raged in the streets, in the hearts of communities seeking change. As the moonlight bathed the shadows of her path, she took a step forward, ready to join those yearning for justice. If Sophie's journey resonates with you, if you believe in the power of change, don't hesitate to join this movement. Like this video, subscribe for more inspiring stories, and become part of a community dedicated to fighting systemic injustice. We're all in this together. Join us as we continue exploring the complexities of privilege, activism, and the fight for justice. Don't miss out on what's next. Subscribe today. Thank you for being part of this journey. Remember, every voice counts. Keep raising yours. Until next time, stay brave and stay united. Sophie's story is just one piece of the larger puzzle, and it's through our collective efforts that we can continue to push for change.